In this lesson, we're going to learn the basics of using a subdivision modeling workflow. Alright, so a subdivision modeling workflow, or subdivision modeling in this case, what it is it's the process of creating low-resolution geometry and using a smoothing method that makes it high resolution. And whenever we use something like Turbo Smooth to create that high resolution and make things appear very smooth, we can lose volume in our geometry. And so what we're going to learn in this lesson is how to use that but still keep our volume in our geometry. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and create just a simple box in the scene. So I'm going to set my length, width, and height. I'm going to cube this out. So I'm going to type in 60 by 60 by 60. And I'm going to leave my length, width, and height segments to 1 by 1 by 1. Let's go ahead and convert this object to editable poly. So with this object, let's say that I want to smooth it out. As I've been saying, very sharp edges are not acceptable in CG, as they are not natural. Okay? And the only case that you would see a sharp edge like this is maybe if it was an object that was actually made to be that sharp. So for example, like a knife or something like that. So I want to use the subdivision modeling workflow to do this. So I'm going to use a modifier called Turbo Smooth. Applying Turbo Smooth, you'll see that we are losing volume. It no longer looks like a box, it looks like a sphere. And if I were to adjust my iterations to make it even more smooth, you'll see that it continues to look more and more like a sphere. Let's go up to 3 iterations here, and let's talk about how we can retain our volume. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to turn on isoline display. What isoline display is going to do is it's going to get rid of any of that smoothing geometry or those edges that are smoothing out this object and only show us what's called the control cage or the isolines of our object. So the isolines or the control cage is what I like to call it, is the original geometry. And what I need to do is I need to create more geometry around the corners that I want to retain volume. So if I want this to appear more like a cube or the original object, I'm going to go to Editable Poly and then turn on Show End Result. Here I can go to Edge Mode and you can see that it's showing me the original geometry. Okay? And what I need to do is I need to create some segments to tell it that it needs to kind of tighten up specific corners. So to get started with this, I'm going to go up to my graphite modeling tools, make sure that those are turned on, and then I'm going to go to Modeling and then Edit. Here you see that we have Swift Loop. This is going to allow me to add segments very quickly, and here I can left click and create a segment, and you'll see that that begins to change the shape of my object. I can go to this side and it begins to round out those edges there. Now it looks more like a cylinder instead of a box, so I need to continue around the edges to get that volume to retain. So here we're looking more and more like a box. Now we have a few issues here right across the top here. I want to make this appear sharper, so I'm going to cut across that curve. So if I left click here, let me go ahead and change the color of this object really quickly, so that way we can see this a little bit easier. There we go. And then I'm also going to make a cut across the bottom. Okay, so now I've smoothed out that box, okay, giving those nice highlights to those edges. It's no longer that sharp, and then I've added segments on my object to control the overall smoothness. Okay, so these are what we call control loops. Now, one important thing that we need to discuss is that these loops will change the shape or the smoothness of our corners based on their distance from the corner itself. So if I wanted to make this corner very sharp, I need to push that edge closer to the original edge. I can do the same thing here, pulling that up, and you can see that that makes it very sharp. However, it does not make it appear as if it's too sharp, okay, like it does with the original object. Now, if I come over to this side And let me grab these edges, and let me actually pull these away. So I'm going to double click on that to select that entire loop, and let me pull that away. Notice how that edge becomes softer. Same thing here. If I pull this down, that edge becomes very soft. Okay, you can see how that is making a nice transition from this point down to here. Okay, smoothing that out. All right, so now we've created a different shape. So this is going to be the basis that we'll be using whenever we are smoothing out our geometry in our course. So you'll want to pay attention to where I'm making the cuts, and then we will talk about how to sharpen up certain edges while leaving others very smooth. And that is going to be an important topic as we go throughout this course. There may be instances where we want particular edges to be sharp and we want particular edges to be smooth. So I may have to come in and take, let's say, this edge right here, and let's double click on that, and let's hold down Alt and deselect the top edge. Okay, so I want this to be very smooth right here, but I need it to be very sharp down here. So I can move this particular edge forward, okay, and you can see that that becomes very sharp here. And then as it goes up, it begins to become a little more relaxed. Okay, so again, we're going to be talking about these throughout the course. As we go through each individual part, we will be smoothing those out, and we'll be using this same workflow. So I just wanted to make sure that you understand the basics before we get to that course. So in our next lesson, we're going to wrap up the last basics for this course, and then we're going to be wrapping up by talking about organization and hierarchy and how that's going to be really important as we go throughout our modeling workflow.